Welcome to the Indie Author Showcase. I'll try that again. Welcome to the Indie Author Showcase, the podcast by indie authors for indie authors. I am your host, multiple award-winning indie author Chad Robert Morgan. And let's start by addressing the elephant in the room. There's no Josh. I promised a Josh Spiro. There's no Josh Spiro. So, scheduling conflict. He is very anxious to do the podcast. He is very anxious to promote his new book, Halloween Volume 2. But it was, we were trying to cram in too much in one weekend. He was, he was already telling me this weekend's going to be really tight and everything like that. And what about next week? Oh, that next weekend's going to be even worse. So we're going to find a date. Okay. So, sorry he's not here this week, but he will be here. I still got to work on that. I got to look see if there's a vocal practice or something, because I do have a nasty. Somebody ping me on that in the comments. I will admit I got to work on that. That is a me thing. I wonder if we can fix this camera a little bit more. If anybody's got tips on how to get out of the habit of umming, I would really appreciate that, because I do admit that's a quirk that I have when I'm doing these podcasts that is really distracting. I actually edit some of them out when I have an opportunity, but I can't get all of them, unfortunately. I also do a lot. So and so's not nearly as egregious, but I got to get rid of the ums. I really got to work on that. So my pledge to you as your host, be a better host. Get rid of the ums and the so's. I promise. Let's talk a little bit about conventions. See, there I go with the again. Let's try this again. Talk a little bit about conventions. Last week was Ghouls Day Out, which is a event hosted by Terror Trader in Chandler, Arizona. Now, I've been told from other vendors that this event is off the hook. My goal was to go out there with my wife and check it out and see if it was worth applying for. We kind of got a little financially behind the eight ball, if you know what I mean. I mean, that's why, and I've made no secret about it, why I'm driving Uber at night, because I'm behind on the bills and everything like that, and I had to take a second job, which really gets in the way of the writing process, because now I got like 1-2 days to write, and half the time I'm so tired I just veg on the couch. So I'm not being the most productive I could be right now. But regardless, we wanted to go. We didn't see that as being viable, but we had our friends over at Black Spot Productions or Black Spot Creations going out for the event, and I'm like, hey, let us know, save us the trip since you're already going out there. So they went out to vendor wares. Great stuff, by the way. If you ever seen them in any of these conventions, we have several of their products. We love their stuff to death. They reported back, first of all, the weather was horrible for them driving out there. Huge rainstorms. He reported back saying it was good, not great. It was sort of my experience with Hauntmare Expo. If you're local, it's worth doing. If you're out of town and you have to get a hotel and the extra travel, maybe not big enough to warrant all that extra effort. I'm still kind of curious. I kind of want to try, just because I want to branch out. I keep doing the same local ones, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I have been getting repeat business. I've had people come and say, oh, I got your last one, now I want this one, which is good. That's building an audience, and that's building a brand. But I do want to expand. So I want to keep doing the local ones, but I also want to expand. So kind of want to do the Chandler one. I did apply for Texas Frightmare Weekend. I think they've already turned me down, I think, if I recall the email correctly. So I'm trying to get out of the state. I really, truly am. I did hear about a really nice one up in Sacramento that I want to apply for next year. I do have family near Sacramento, so that actually wouldn't be too bad. It's a long drive. Sacramento from where I am is at least 6 if not 8 hour drive. But I got family there. I can visit with them. I can crash at their place. So that could be a fun one. That could work. I understand the booth fees are rather low on top of that. So this weekend is going to be LA Comic Con. Now, I've never been to LA Comic Con. I've been to San Diego Comic Con. I've been to WonderCon. I've been to Pasadena Comic Con. I've never done LA. And some of the other vendors have said that's a really good one for independent authors. Now, it's a little late for me to apply because it's this weekend. But we're planning on going and scoping it out, seeing how big it is, seeing how busy it is, see how many indie authors there are, and determine if it's something we want to apply for next year. So that's our goal for this weekend. And 2 weeks ago, we had Creep It Real OC, which is a really fun one. And for the first time, I actually saw an indie author, our good friend John Wayne Caminal, at one of these events. So yeah, at first I was surprised to see an indie author because I've gone to this thing technically, this is the first time I've gone to Creep It Real OC. I've gone to Creep It Real Festival, their Christmas one, like twice. It's a really fun event. But this is the first time I went to their main one because I was usually busy. So I went to their main one during the day. It was fun, and I actually saw an indie author, which, again, having gone to the Christmas season one several times, I've never seen an indie author. And I was surprised to find it was our friend John Wayne Caminal. So, surprise on top of surprise on that one. So, I mean, that gives me hope that I can actually get in, because they do actually have indie authors at this place. And they actually had a panel with R.L. Stine, which kind of is like, you should have more indie authors in this one, because you have an author at your thing. Like, that would have been a perfect event for our friend Josh Spiro to go to, because his book is very goosebumpy, in that vein. It is written for younger kids. That would have been an excellent companion for that show, but they didn't ask me. As you can see, this is a busy season for conventions, and then next month we have Son of Monsterpalooza. They're going to have the legendary Tim Curry there, and they're also going to have Katie Seagal, who is Leela from Futurama. So in honor of that, I am going to do the first time in my going to Son of Monsterpalooza, I am going to bring more than my horror books. I'm going to bring my other series as well, Intergalactic Space Force, which is my interpretation of Star Trek episodes if they were written by the guys from South Park. So that should be a good fit, considering there's going to be some Futurama fans there. In honor of that, for the next 3 weeks until Son of Monsterpalooza, you can use promo code ISF to get 30% off any ISF merchandise. Screw 30%. Let's make it 40%. 40% off. Use promo code ISF. Anything, t-shirts, pajamas, beach towels, coffee mugs, you name it. Anything that has the ISF logo on it, or anything that has to do with either of the two books, 40% off at our store, shopspectralink.com. Edit out to me sucking up a big loogie. I'm getting over a bit of a cold. So that's basically it for the news. Again, I was expecting to have a interview, and speaking of interviews, I did talk to Alex Stark, because he was over at Creep It Real OC, and did not have really a chance to talk to him too much at Creep It Real OC because he was swamped. He was busy. He was hustling. So, let's see, there I go again with the so's. Got to get rid of the so's. I did, however, get a message to him that, yeah, we did do the showcase. We did feature your book. He did get back to me on Instagram. He says, yeah, I totally need it. I would love to answer your questions. I checked it out, and oh, that's great, and I'd love to get on the show. I really want to talk to him about this whole autism thing because, as you can imagine, this is becoming a thing now. We have the Trump administration saying Tylenol causes autism when Tylenol came out 30 years after autism was first discovered. Now, in all fairness, this is something that's actually been miscategorized. Everybody's saying Trump's saying that Tylenol causes. No, technically, what they said was Tylenol increases the risk of autism, which I think technically is true, but increased by like a fraction of 1%. Like, the studies have shown that at best it's inconclusive. So the what the administration's saying and what the science is saying doesn't really line up. But that's a whole different thing. The point is that, and I'm getting political. Let's get out of being political. This is not the show to be political. The point being is that autism is kind of a conversation bit these days. So, conversation bit. I speak goodly. Autism is a bit of, it's something that's in the public eye right now. And one of the things that kind of infuriated me when RFK Jr. was up there, he was all like, autism, they don't, this is the worst RFK Jr. impersonation anywhere. They don't pay taxes. They don't have jobs. They don't. And then you see like somebody like Alex, who is running a business, running his own conventions, married, the complete 180 of what RFK was describing. But he says he's diagnosed with autism. So I do think that's a discussion to be had, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions, starting with RFK Jr. down, as to what autism means. And I got to be honest, I don't know that much about it myself. I do know that right now, my oldest son was diagnosed with Asperger's, which is a variation of autism or something like that. And, you know, he's leading basically a normal life, right? He's got a job, he's getting married. He's just a normal dude, right? So I don't know what him being autistic actually means, because he's not, you know, when I was a kid growing up, we saw autism, we're like, oh, you know, Rain Man, you know, Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man. That to us was autism. That's not Alex, and that's not Michael. And now my daughter is saying she's been diagnosed with autism, and this is after graduating UC Davis. So, you know, again, these aren't what I consider autistic people. These are considered what I could consider just normal people, which I think was part of Copeland's book J-Pod, because he was trying to get to that in the end, where he was basically saying all the people, all the characters in the book were basically on the spectrum. And I think his goal in that book was to say that being on the spectrum is actually kind of normal. Like, everybody is, you know, it's like the old song, everybody's a little bit racist, you know, from Avenue Q. Well, everybody's a little autistic, it's true. You know, it's not a question of if you're autistic, it's not. It's just a question of degrees, right? To a certain point, like, a lot of us have a little bit. At least that's what the point of J-Pod was, I should say. Not necessarily my opinion, but what J-Pod was saying. I myself don't know enough, and I am looking forward to picking Alex's brain on the subject, because, again, I got family members that are, you know, my own kids that are saying that they're diagnosed with autism, which, again, I don't see it. I don't know what that means. They're not the that 80s Rain Man definition. They're just normal people, as far as I'm concerned. So But this is the guy to talk to because he literally revised his books and branded it Autism Edition, right? To take into account his life now that he was aware of this autism diagnosis. One thing I would push back on him, though, because he was always asking in the book, why did nobody notice this when I was a kid? And I'm like, I don't notice it in my kids. I don't notice it in Alex. You know, like I mean, we're not beer buddies or anything. I don't know him that well, but I mean, I've talked to him several times at these conventions, and he's just a normal dude. It would never cross my mind. So I can't imagine him not being diagnosed until later in life. Why would he? Why would anybody suspect it? He's just a guy. He's just a normal guy, as far as I'm concerned. So that I'm really looking forward to getting him on the show because I really want to pick his brain about this. And again, it's not coming from a point of view of, you know, I got an axe to grind or anything like that. I'm just legitimately curious because I don't know enough, I don't understand enough, and I want to know more. So I'm really looking forward to asking a butt ton of questions, which should make for a good interview. So I know we're getting a lot of discussion about riding gun these days, aren't we? Let's go ahead and get into the review. So I do have a couple of reviews lined up just for situations like this. And this week we're going to talk about Such Lovely Skin by Tatiana Schlote-Bonne. I hope I got that name right. So one thing to note about this is that the author and the main character have a similar background. And I say that because I'm kind of getting the vibe that she's putting a lot of her personal experiences into the character, such as both the author and the character are part Japanese, and so there's these certain expressions about, not expressions, but expectations of her Asian heritage that are coming up, such as people assuming that just because she's Asian, she's got a tight, vajayjay, that she speaks Japanese, that kind of thing. So on the one hand, that really brings the character to life, right? It's also one reason why I will struggle a little bit when writing minorities in my own book, because I'm not a minority. And so I really want my characters to feel authentic. And if I'm writing somebody who's part Japanese, like this character in the book, I would want to interview somebody that's part Japanese and get their experiences and get that into the book, because otherwise you're just kind of winging it. I kind of did that in my first book and I really regretted it. I did not, I had to kind of rework the character a bit to make them feel more authentic, because they were being more of a Hollywood version of the character, and I didn't like that. So it does bring a lot of realism to the character, but I also kind of wonder what happens if she's got to write another character. Like, are all her characters going to be of mixed race, half Japanese, and all that kind of stuff? Because I'm saying this because I'm struggling with this in my own writing. I don't want my characters to be all one note. I don't want, like, to write 15 books and they all be about white guys, right? In The Last Rite, I have Native Americans. In The Baby Eater, I have Filipinos. In Fear, I have Hispanics. And again, the goal is to get some diversity, because that's the world we live in. We don't live in a world where it's just all people like me. God, would you want that? Ugh. I don't want that. I don't have that in my own damn house. The world is diverse, and as a writer, you have to, inject that diversity, but you also have to make it seem real. And when you just have your token black guy, for example, Um, and I say that because I always remember the guy from South Park whose name is Token, is Tolkien with an L, but that was always like a big running joke that it's Token because he's the token black guy because um, you want to make the character feel real and authentic, and you can't do that if you don't understand the race and the culture that person comes from. When I did the Baby Eater, I had a huge advantage. I was, and still am, living with Filipinos who could tell me all the parts that I was getting wrong. And they had this whole family of in laws that were just a face chat away to say, oh, yeah. When I was working on the book, they took my mother in law to her home village. I'm like, oh, take pictures. I want to see what it looks like. And I used that as reference when writing The Baby Eater. So I had a huge advantage of this other culture I have married into that I can lean on. When I was writing Fear, I come from a mixed race relationship. My stepmother is Hispanic. My stepsisters are Hispanic. I based the main characters in the book off of my extended family from my stepmother's side of the family. And that too kind of gave me a leg up, right? I had this experience of living with them, even though I'm not really part of that culture, but I lived with them for so long that I could kind of crib off of that, right? So that leaves me with a conundrum as a writer. Well, what do I do next? Like, if I have a black character, how do I make that black character seem authentic without having lived the black experience? If I have a, say, Iranian character or even Chinese character, because Chinese is different than Filipino, Japanese is different than Chinese. How do I make that authentic and real if I don't know anybody from that culture, if I don't, so that to me becomes a challenge. With getting back to Tatiana, she's obviously lived that experience. So the character in Such Lovely Skin inherits that from her, which is great. It makes it real. My question is, what happens in the next one, in the next book? Are all her characters going to be, part Japanese, part Hispanic, or is that going to pose a challenge to her as a writer to expand her diversity in her characters? So I'm curious as to where she's going to go with that. In the book, this is a Twitch streamer who's been off the streams for a while because there was this tragic accident that she basically blames herself for. She says, like in the first chapter, I killed my little sister. Now, we learned through the book that she didn't really kill her little sister. She was negligent and allowed a horrible accident to happen. And then in her panic, she covered it up to make it look like it wasn't her fault. She starts playing this indie game, and in the indie game is a demon. And the demon basically kind of co-ops her life. Basically, the main character has to tell a secret. She tells about the death of her sister, and so that's how the demon gets her hooks in her. And then the demon starts impersonating her and basically ruining her life. And this whole story is her fighting the demon, trying to figure out how to fight the demon, and usually coming into dead ends. Trying to convince her friends that no, she didn't do those things. That was the other person. I mean, it's kind of hard to convince somebody, no, I did not send a nudie to your boyfriend, when they hold up the picture and it's you. I mean, that's kind of, visual. It becomes a challenge, obviously. And I don't want to spoil things. I will say the end of the book was the one part at the end of the book that I thought was a bit broke my suspension of disbelief was when she told her parents and they were, I thought, way too forgiving. Um, I mean, obviously, it was. I mean, she did not purposely kill her little sister, obviously, and there was the way that the death was faked. The mother was blaming herself, so she had a certain amount of relief that it wasn't her actually. But yeah, that part of the book, I thought. I mean, I just from my own experience as a kid. Yeah, Dad, I dented the car. What the hell? So, let alone killing a kid, like that just. But I do appreciate before she comes clean with her parents, she starts. And again, I don't want to get spoilery. And there's a point where she has to come clean to her audience, and she thinks this is going to ruin her and everything like that. And just a lot of people are like, yeah, I've done horrible things too. Sometimes good people make bad mistakes. Sometimes good people do bad things. We're not perfect, and sometimes we panic. Sometimes we make bad decisions, and I think that was sort of the gist towards the end of the book, that was kind of the theme, and that she had to forgive herself, because the entire time, like I said in the book, she's saying I killed my sister, which again she did not really do. Right? She's just blaming herself. So just that last little bit at the end, like if you changed that, I think this would have been a much stronger book. So this was a good book. This was a strong book. This was, I think it's labeled as a YA. I didn't realize that at the time I read it, but it kind of makes sense. But it is a bunch of high school kids. There are some not super mature stuff going on, but I mean, there is at one point where the demon sends her bestie's boyfriend a racy shot, and like you can see a little nipple in there. She does talk about this concept of like her last boyfriend got all excited because found out she was half Japanese, and that meant that because she was Asian, she had a tight, hoo-ha kind of thing. So there are some mature topics, but again, there's stuff that teenagers actually are kind of dealing with. You know what I mean? There wasn't like any kind of explicit sex or gore or anything like that, but there were some of those kind of mature conversations. So this is definitely the late teens is definitely the age group that this book was going for. So, but overall, strong book. I liked it, and yeah, it was a good scary read. Perfect for Halloween, especially if you're in the teen bracket. So, highly recommend. So that's it for this month's. Not this month's. Try this again. So that's it for this week's podcast. I know, again, we're being a little short. Again, I was hoping for a big, huge, juicy interview. Thanks, Josh. Nah, it's fine. He's going to be back. He's going to be here hopefully in a couple weeks. Unless I make fun of him and totally piss him off. So yeah, we'll work on getting Josh here as soon as possible. We'll work on getting Alex. There's a couple other authors I kind of want to ask if they want to be on the podcast. Really looking forward to getting some more interviews on here. We haven't had many this year, and I would like to hear from other authors and hear their experiences and their take on things. I think that would be really beneficial. There we go with the again. So we will be at Son of Monsterpalooza. It's in about 3 weeks. We'll see you there. And until then, keep on reading. Oh, and don't forget, 40% off. Use ISF for anything ISF related on our web store, shopspectralink.com. Until then, keep on reading.